Hi there, my name's Dave Butler. I teach semi-traditional Bujutsu and Kenjutsu. Of course, I hold some pride in the certificates that you saw a minute ago on the walls around me. However, I recognise that they are not of much interest to anybody else. They do, however, serve as time markers and demonstrate that I've been involved in martial arts for a long time, almost 60 years at this point. Just to one side you can see my entry point to martial arts in 1963 at around 8 years of age. As I head towards the twilight of my martial arts career, it's important that some of my experience is transferred to the next generation of martial artists. Failing to do so would mean that many years of study are completely wasted. I would be negligent not to pass on as much information as possible. Part of this transfer happens on the mat directly with my students. This, I hope, will continue. Some information, however, can be more widely disseminated, so I will be making a number of simple training videos to show a few key aspects of martial arts. Not everything can be demonstrated because that would take another lifetime, and we don't have that at our disposal. The inspiration for this discussion came from one of my students when he posted an African proverb on Facebook. It got me thinking, and I immediately applied the same sentiment to martial arts. It says that when an old person dies, a library burns down. The idea behind it is that a lot of knowledge is lost. This video is more about a suggested approach to martial arts, one that you may consider or reject. This applies to the psyche that might be applied to training, and which can be applied to any Japanese martial art. To understand where I'm coming from, you really need to also understand where Japanese martial arts came from, and how they developed and evolved. There's a lot of information available on the history of martial arts. I'm currently writing a book about Jiu-Jitsu, which includes some of this. I think a knowledge of history is a highly valuable tool to keep modern martial arts somewhere within its original context. It's important to me that the study of martial arts continue in a manner that ties training strongly to the origins of the art we study. I do not mean that actual combat to the death is necessary. I mean that training as though it could be intended for actual combat is necessary. I mean that the approach, the attitudes of those involved, and the training regimes, the discipline, the dedication, and the methodology to the arts should be maintained similar to what it was decades and centuries ago. The video is not about me, although I do give a few personal examples from time to time. The discussion is actually about you. And I probably don't know you, so I have no right whatsoever to tell you what to do. Feel free to accept or reject what I say. I simply pass on some observations made over a number of decades. In Japan, prior to the year 1615, was the period of the warring states. It was called the Sengoku Jidai, or Sengoku period. During this period, various clans would battle for supremacy, and this led to the perfection of the Japanese arts of war and the weapons they used. And these all later evolved into the martial arts that we know today. Of course, it has been said that Japanese martial arts have been in steady decline since 1603 when the Tokugawa shogunate was established. The Tokugawa period established a more peaceful approach, and there was a lesser need to perfect the skills of war. Historical researcher and practitioner Obata Toshishiro Sensei has claimed in his writings, and to me personally, that this was the case, and I completely understand why he made this statement. Contrary to this, however, we need to remind students that because of a new feeling of trust and cooperation that existed during this peaceful period, the skills of martial artists were more widely shared, so that some growth, or at least a spread of skill, was also experienced during this time through the transfer between the previously competing schools. The Tokugawa period was not entirely peaceful in any case. There were skirmishes and local encounters that ensured the samurai remained at the top of his game. To remind us, one such skirmish in January of 1703 was the case of the 47 Ronin who raided Lord Kira's mansion. This was a dramatic point in Japanese history, and you'd be well advised to research it. A depiction of the event is shown on screen. It has also been the subject of books and movies in Japan. It illustrates that the samurai had cause to maintain his skill level during this period. The event also relates to honour in martial arts, to dedication, to loyalty, and to justice and trust. During the change from battlefield use of martial arts to martial arts used in peacetime, Jujutsu changed from Yoroi Kumyochi, or Jujutsu wearing armor, to Haifaku Kumyochi, Jujutsu wearing civilian clothes. And the techniques themselves evolved due to the change of clothing and the change of environment in which martial arts were used. You'll notice that I use the term Kumyochi. This is an early reference to Jujutsu. The term Jujutsu evolved much later, and prior to the Tokugawa period all sorts of names were used from Kumyochi to Yawara, Taijutsu, Torite, Koppo, Hakuda, Kempo, and so forth, often depending on the techniques and the strengths of the dojo concerned. Jujutsu was not alone. Changes in other arts were brought about where Kenjutsu changed in a similar manner, and the samurai were more likely to engage in a civil conflict on foot rather than riding a horse on the battlefield. Sword lengths had already changed, and even the carrying of the sword from edge down to edge up evolved quite early on. Sometime later, the emphasis on Batojutsu and Kenjutsu reduced, and the study of Iaido began to gain in prominence. But while these changes took place, the overall skill set seemed to be maintained, as did the methods of preparation and training. Some experts, including Obata Toshishiro sensei, believed that because people were no longer in a constant state of war, the development of weapons slowed and may even have deteriorated during these peaceful times. And this may well be true. The next big change came at the Meiji Restoration on January the 3rd, 1868, when power was transferred from the shogunate back to the emperor. In 1871, the cropped hair edict, cutting off the samurai's top knot, was issued. And in 1876, the wearing of the sword in public by samurai was prohibited. These were some of the most significant changes in Japanese history. Martial arts had changed forever. The samurai era had officially expired. From this point, martial arts were taught and learned as a cultural activity by anybody who was interested. The samurai had no income, and some taught their skills in return for money so that they could earn a living. It is notable that while Jujutsu dojos existed prior to this time, they were traditional family schools that had endured for generations, usually headed by a soke who had inherited the system. Often all of the 18 arts of the samurai were taught, but changes in society meant changes to the dojo. Only a few traditional systems managed to retain their full curriculum. Tenshin Shoden Katori Shikto Ryu was one of these, and is now a national treasure of Japan, although the Jujutsu curriculum is somewhat depleted. The Kuroda family's Shinbukan dojo is another of these. This family inherited the ancient arts of Komogawa Kaishin Ryu Kenjutsu, Shishin Takuma Ryu Jujutsu, Tamiya Ryu Iai-jutsu, Tsubake Kotengu Ryu Bojutsu, and Seigyoku Oguri Ryu Satokatsu Jutsu. And they had other arts as well. Of course, the Daito Ryu formally came into existence, or under the guidance of Takeda Sokaku in Hokkaido during the latter part of the 19th century. This is when Daito Ryu Aikijujutsu was either formed or consolidated. Around the same time, Professor Kano had completed some training in several styles of Jujutsu and attempted to unify these under the name of Judo. His dojo, the Kodokan, began in 1882. On screen you'll see a photo of the original Kodokan as it was in 1895. It was these years after the Meiji Restoration and then through the first half of the 20th century that I call the golden years of modern martial arts. A period when Japan had changed from a feudal system and turned to embrace the world. Its comprehensive array of martial arts was still fresh in the minds of its instructors and ready to export around the globe. Numerous teachers, spread their skills both in Japan and abroad, still embracing the original spirit of the samurai. It is this last statement that is important, still embracing the spirit of the samurai. The masters of Budo, be it Jujutsu, Aikijutsu, Karate, Judo, were hard men who trained in a traditional manner. Budo was life to these people. Their world was the dojo. Training was hard and relentless. Conditions were tough. Discipline was harsh. I was fortunate to experience just a few of these features of traditional martial arts training under Japanese masters. Obata Soke for a 15-year period. Sato Meijin for a 10-year period, and Kuroda Soke more briefly and much more recently. Elements of this approach also came through some of the older generation European masters with whom I had the great honour to study, and who had in turn learned from hardened Japanese masters. A short clip of my first meeting with Soke Richard Morris in London, about 84 or 1987, illustrates the no-nonsense approach that had been passed down to some of these European masters. At all these classes, there were expectations. It was a privilege to train under these people, and I was frequently reminded of my obligations for being granted these privileges, not always by the master, but sometimes being put in place by other committed students. You had to work. It was expected of you. You had to achieve. It was expected of you. Why would these great masters waste their time with a gaijin who did not treasure what was being taught? In order to train with the great masters, it was also costly. Frequent travel involving the purchase of international air tickets, accommodation, meals, time off work, local transportation, hefty tuition fees, and other related costs. These soon accumulated to be very significant sums of money, all paid to endure hardship. I even uprooted my family to another city and accepted an international sales job in order that I could travel to train more frequently overseas with the masters mentioned. This is not conveyed as a sob story, not at all, because I absolutely treasured those times and saw great value in what I was doing. It's simply an example of how in times gone by the approach and commitment to learning may have been a little different to much of what we see today. I was not alone, of course. There were others in karate, judo, taijutsu, names you may be familiar with from right here in New Zealand, and many of course from other countries, finding their way to achieve their own goals, but also at some sacrifice to themselves and their families. Then I compare what was acceptable and even attractive to me with what I sometimes see in the modern Western dojo. The modern dojo is on occasion very lax. Students turn up late to class. Discipline is poor. Often poor excuses are given for not attending training. And this is when the dojo is in the same town as the student. And in earlier times, committed students were flying 24 or 36 hours with no sleep, often several hours local travel to get to the dojo, and then expected to train for a further 12 hours on arrival, and paying a fortune for the pleasure of doing so. I also researched stories of how the earlier founding masters relished their own training. They were far more committed than I was. They had limited incomes, no resources, but devoted their lives and their very being to their training. A youthful Mochizuki sensei, for example, would awaken in the very early hours to walk a great distance across Tokyo, regardless of the weather, to be at the dojo by 6 a.m. One story has it that prior to training, a young Mochizuki sensei wanted to freshen up before training, so jumped in a barrel of ice-cold water near the dojo entrance. It was Mifune sensei who saw this and pulled him out of the barrel, and feeling sorry for his student, allowed him to live in his home thereafter, which was closer to the dojo. These people were prepared to endure absolute hardship on a daily basis for the arts they loved. So forgive me if I appear to dismiss frivolous and flimsy excuses of students who place everything else ahead of their martial arts. What it amounts to is that everything else holds a higher priority than martial arts for many students. And despite what I'm saying, this is actually not entirely bad, because people train martial arts for a variety of reasons. Each individual must organise their own life's priorities. The conflict or incongruency only comes when a student really wants to achieve and expects to be elevated to a particular rank, but then becomes disappointed when that rank doesn't eventuate. Often this is because they have not made martial arts the priority. They have succumbed to other distractions. They do not apply the commitment we heard about earlier, but they still want and they still expect that higher rank. But this lifestyle and the priorities they set was entirely their choice. Their achievements or lack of achievements was their choice. If you really want to excel at martial arts or excel at any activity, then this activity must become number one priority. You must enjoy the discipline, the hardship, the sacrifices made in order to arrive at your life's goal. This is one of the teaching of martial arts. And as the saying goes, everything about life can be learned in the dojo, if you choose to turn up. Obata Sensei held 87 Dan ranks, including high ranks in 5 styles of traditional samurai swordsmanship. I saw and examined his menkyo. These ranged from aikijitsu to kenjutsu, kobudo, even ninpo. He trained under the very best teachers of his time, in the arts that he studied. He had no job in the normal sense. He was a professional student or a professional martial artist from the outset. Obata Sensei had a period of 7 years where he was involved making martial arts movies. Regularly in class, he would talk about the lives of his students in terms of their life being a movie. He would often use words like this: "This is your scenario. You are the writer. You are the producer. You are the director. You are also the main actor. You can make your life into whatever movie you choose." And this is true. Your life is what you choose to make it, and you write the beginning and the end scene. If you make the right decisions and apply yourself to the achievement of those objectives, then you will have a productive life. If your life choice is martial arts, and you choose the right art and the right instructor and apply yourself, then you will become a good martial artist. And the opposite is also true. But whatever the result, you chose it. So let's talk about rank for a minute. If you are serious about martial arts, please do not become focused on rank. Instead, become focused on achieving knowledge and skill. You cannot teach a rank and you cannot teach a certificate, but you can teach knowledge and you can teach skill. Also, do not be inclined to show off or to impress others with your skill. Be content that you know what you know, and what you know is none of anyone else's business. Give your knowledge only to those who are worthy of receiving it. And what about martial arts values? Here are a few values to consider that may guide you in martial arts endeavours. Accept them or dismiss them as you see fit. Of course, you already have your own values for which you are responsible. Start with number 1. Try to become a better person. This is the primary goal of martial arts. Number 2. Try to help others reach their own goals. Show them how, but let them do the work. Number 3. Make yourself available to those who truly want to learn. Number 4. Mix with worthwhile and productive people whom you aspire to be like. 5. Do not intentionally aim to harm or disfavour others, but do not waste your time with those who want a free ride. 6. Criticise poor conduct in martial arts, absolutely. Put people on the right path, but do not publicly criticise what you consider to be bad technique, unless you can immediately demonstrate how to do the same thing better. For example, if you see a video or poor technique, you do not condemn it until you are prepared to place a video of yourself online doing the movement or concept correctly. We seem to have a lot of verbal warriors and not as many who are able to demonstrate their own competence. Try hard to be the latter. Lastly, number 7. Strongly criticise dishonesty in martial arts. and this includes the issuing and receipt of false or inflated ranks that have not been earned in a proper manner. The prize is neither the certificate nor the rank. The prize in martial arts is knowledge and the ability to share that knowledge. That's not to say you should not be proud of achieving a rank, but this should not be the narrow focus of your goal. The rank should merely be a true and correct record of your ability, your knowledge, and your service to martial arts. These things come first. Do not get graded by somebody inferior simply to get an easy certificate. In fact, do the exact opposite. Obtain your ranks from the best in their field. Those who try to inflate their martial arts record with false certificates make themselves look not only weak and stupid, but they also appear insecure. The piece of paper they have is worth nothing. They have diminished themselves and the art they engage in. They devalue all their colleagues who work hard and do things right. I have far more respect for a crisp, sharp, competent yellow belt than I have for a sloppy and lazy orange or green belt. And this principle applies right through the range of ranks. Think about the origins of Japanese martial arts we discussed before. Think of the culture, the values that accompanied the old martial arts, the koryu, and try to include these values and show the same pride in your own training. I believe martial arts have begun a downhill slide. Those who have rejected a flashy lifestyle in exchange for relentless hard training are getting fewer and fewer. But if you want to be good at traditional martial arts, these are the people to seek out and the methods to adopt. By considering some of the aforementioned and including it in your own training, it may be possible to keep martial arts as the strong and noble activity that it deserves to be. An art that engenders respect and displays credibility, an art that sets an example for others to follow. Turn your television off, throw your mobile phone away, go to the dojo. There you'll learn about life and become the person you deserve to be. This will enable you to begin your own library that you can share with others.